Welcome to Real Conversations with Patricia Baranovsky-Schneider, the podcast that takes you on a journey around the world to meet some of the most inspiring and accomplished individuals. Discover their stories, uncover invaluable business lessons from their paths to success, and gain exclusive insights on how to apply their strategies to elevate your life and business.
Hello, and welcome to Real Conversations with Patricia. I'm your host, Patty Baranovsky-Schneider. Today, I'm joined by David Nordel, military transition, mental health leadership development, and MAX FAB. So welcome, David. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, thanks. It's great to be here. We just talked a little bit about the snow and the cold. So I'm up in Montana. I'm up in Billings, Montana. Hey, you kind of brushed over the stuff really quick, and I really want to dive into what we want to talk about. But I did a over 30-year military career from 1984 to 2014. My last job in the military was as the command senior enlisted leader for all the folks that take care of our intercontinental ballistic missiles for the nation. So wow. Interesting stuff.
Little responsibility there, huh?
It's kind of funny. And, when I went in the military, I wanted to be a plumber, and the military made me a medic, which turned into becoming a nurse and doing shock trauma and taking those skills to the combat zone and taking care of our brothers and sisters probably in their largest moment of need. And that pushed me to some higher level leadership positions. And as I got out of that, after you do 30 years in anything, right? 30 years as a fireman, 30 years as an executive, 30 years as a secretary, it doesn't really matter. After you do 30 years of anything, you have to transition. And when you transition, sometimes that's easy and sometimes it's not so easy. And for our military folks, it's a real phenomenon. It's like being institutionalized, like being a prisoner and getting out of prison, right? We have a certain way, and when we come back, it doesn't look that way. Mm-hmm. So, the work now is to help institutions that you have to have a heart, you have to have a desire, and you have to really, really want to take the next step beyond thank you for your service. Mm-hmm. But if you're running a company, a business, an organization that really, really, really wants to do something for veterans, then you need to get a hold of me so I can show you how, because to navigate that is not it's not something where you just say, yeah, we love veterans and we put a little logo on our website, because the veterans may come to you, but you don't know what to do with them when they get there. Right. So I'm that guy.
No, I salute you, man. I mean, I could imagine it's, my family is military. I know a lot of people. Actually, the one podcast channel I was on was majority ex-military, and it's a hard transition, so I get it. Now tell us, you mentioned the plumber, but what motivated you to join the Air Force at 19, and how did your experience shape your perspective on leadership and life?
Well, I grew up on a dairy farm, and so the first book I wrote is Help Getting Back Life and Leadership from the Farm to the Combat Zone and Beyond. and I just feel like anything that you need to know in life, you can learn from a farming environment. And when you grow up around that, there's success and failure and trials and tribulations and Mother Nature and hard work and satisfaction and the harvest and all the things that go along with that. And so it kind of sets you up for how to kind of navigate difficulties. And you can learn a lot from people that have made their whole lives and doing that. And so my mother's three things were always God, family, country, in that order. And the country piece is, where do you serve and how do you do that? I had some really good World War II veterans in my family that were great examples. And so I wanted to serve. Yeah, I want to go in the Navy. And the Navy, you want to talk about you can't afford to have a bad day. The Navy recruiter on the day that they were all standing in the room was really not a very nice human being. Mm-hmm. And the Air Force guy put his hand on my shoulder, changed the whole course of trajectory, and I'm glad that that's the way it went. So,
it was meant to be.
So no regrets. So yeah, I was, as a young guy, the military was just kind of always on my scope, and that's where I was headed. Now, what I wanted to do and what I thought I could do and those type of things in the military, they had different plans for me, and thank goodness that happened too. So.
Hey, you know what? Sometimes life doesn't give you what you want, but it gives you what you need.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly.
Now tell us, leading teams of various sizes in high-stakes environment, it's not an easy feat. So what are the core principles of leadership that guided you through your career?
I'll tell you, some of it's trial and error and having the right mentors, right? And having people around you that are patient enough to let you learn the craft.
Right.
Everybody wants to be in a leadership position because quite frankly, I think that we have it a little bit upside down, and we kind of look at our titles and we say, if I have this title, then I'm the leader.
Yeah.
And the enlisted ranks in the military start at E1 and they go to E9. E9 is as far as you can go. And then there's segments of being in E9 in the senior leadership positions. Over those 30 years, I got stuck at E5 for a long time. It kind of threw me off a normal trajectory if I wanted to go. Not everybody makes E9 or E8 even, or E7. It's, it's not a gimme. You got to do the work.
Right.
But I got stuck at E5 and everybody kept saying, you're leading and doing, you should be an E6 or E7, you should be going and going and going. And I got stuck. You take your tests, you compete against everybody else, and I got stuck. And when I look back, because after I made 6, I made 6, 7, 8, 9, all first time out. But not only did I catch up, but I was kind of ahead of the game.
Okay.
And I was stuck at 5 for a long time. And if I looked back from 9, from being a chief, back to when I was a staff sergeant, and that's no different than the organization. Being stuck there was the most important part of my whole entire career because I wasn't completely removed from being the 5. And at a staff sergeant, tech sergeant level, or 5 or 6, you're a mid-level manager. You probably got 15 people working for you, or you're 5 to 15 people working for you. You're running a section, some sort of section, some sort of part of the organization. When you know how that works, fundamentally how that works, and you can build a level of empathy at that level. I like to liken it to, rats live below the waterline in the ship. Okay. So you should always be in tune with the rats, right? Because if there's a leak, they're the first ones that are going to know.
Yeah, true.
And so I have a little character called Randy the Rat, and I use that parable when I speak about leadership. I use the parable because, the cliche is the rats are leaving the ship. Well, the rats leave the ship because the ship is sinking, but nobody knows that except the rats know first, and probably when you could actually plug the leak and not sink.
Yeah.
But if you don't have a relationship with the rats, they just come up on top and they jump over and they leave.
Yeah.
If you have a relationship with the rats, they usually run up and tell you when there's leaks in the organization.
Right.
This has to be learned because sometimes we get caught up in, we get a position, we're leading people, and we take all of our cues from the next rung on the organizational chart. We take our cues from that person, we kind of serve that person. And actually, that's the least important person. If you want to go up in an organization, you'll be pushed up by the people underneath you. They will push you to the top, but you have to spend your time and cycle back down. And so the reason I use that example is that I spent enough time at that tactical environment that when I became an operational and then even a more strategic leader, it was very easy for me to run back down and connect tactically to find out really what the truth is.
Right.
Because a lot of times in leadership, we think that we're leading and really what we're doing is hyper-managing.
Yeah.
And because leadership is not standard, there's no checklist that goes along with it. There's not, this happened, so I do these things. There's no 12 whys, 7 habits, or 19, ways. You can't rip the back page out of some fancy book that was written and say, I'm doing all these things I must be leading well. Your cues come. So leaders are appointed and anointed only by their peers and followers.
Yeah.
And so.
No,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
No, I agree 100%. Like, I was just telling somebody else's story, how I started my career as a receptionist, and I literally put in all the hard work and, 18-hour days and 7 days a week and worked my way up the corporate ladder. But it gave me a sense of what everybody in those, levels are doing, where I saw other people like, here I am trying to make my way up. And then there's someone who just graduated college and they're up here. 0 experience, but it was the title that meant something. And yet I would see people like back in the day, marketing days, this is way before computers and all that good stuff, where they would say, we have this presentation, it has to be done in 45 minutes. Well, having been the person doing them once upon a time, I could say, that's not going to happen. You have to do A, B, C, and I could tell you all the nuances that are going to happen. It's realistically 3 hours, but it's like you need everybody. And I was the same way. I took everybody out to lunch. I want to talk about what's bothering you because no one ever wants to hear from the low man on the totem pole. But you are what's helping me do my job, and you're just as important as me. And I think companies, slowly but surely, they're starting to see this, but they got a long way to go still.
I think Patricia, that's my wife's first name. I call her Pat, but yeah.
Yeah.
Tricia, I think that we missed 2 full generations of deliberate development of leaders. And this is hard to say. And to your listeners, I hope they really listen to this because, and I won't bore you with the long drawn out story, but it ended up, I sometimes in a room when I'm talking to leaders, I say, if you've ever been subjected to a 60 minutes interview, raise your hand. Usually the hands never go up. If they do, I want to talk to the person afterwards.
Right.
Because you only get on 60 minutes for one of 2 reasons, right? You are the first confirmed pregnant male on the face of the planet, or you've really screwed something up, right? And so I got to be part of a 60 minutes interview. And I can remember talking to my boss at the time, who's a senior general officer. I can remember talking to my boss at the time. And the situation, I won't get into the details, but it was big enough to be on 60 Minutes. The situation that we were handling, I finally went to him and I said, we need to apologize to a lot of people. And he goes, what are you talking about? And I said, the problem is a result of a culture that was laid in when you were a captain. You was a young airman. I said, we're responsible for this. We've nurtured this culture that ended up in this aberrancy. So even though we're in the senior positions where we have to manage it, that we have to manage it, we're responsible for the culture. So we have to go back and apologize to everybody because some of the missteps that were made were driven by the culture, not by bad people, but by bad culture. And if you have bad culture in your organization, if you make these things that you just described, if you make that time available, if you do 10 of those, 3 people are going to say, do you really want to know what I have to say? And you're going to say, yes. And then you better put on your body armor. You better put on your ego protector and all the other things that come. Because guess what? They're going to tell you some things that you wish you never heard.
Right.
And that discovery learning is going to hurt your feelings. Well, and I would say the higher percentage of leaders run back to their job title and their position. And you'd say, well, you just don't understand what it's like from the 30,000 foot level. Actually, I really don't care what it's like at the 30,000 foot level because whatever you're doing up there, it sucked out all the oxygen at the 5 foot level.
Right.
And so I don't cut anybody any slack anymore, Patricia, because first of all, I don't hold this batch of quote unquote leaders that we have right now. And I'm not, I can't do a full indictment on everybody that's in leadership position. But from the day I went to the United States military to the day I left, I was deliberately developed, formally and informally, constantly developed. And I was given room to kind of screw things up and to learn. And to this day, I'm still not perfect. There's people that had worked for me for 20 years that if they were here now, they'd go, oh my goodness, what are you doing talking about leadership? I want to just stick a pin in your eye, right? And I would say, I don't blame you because I was at this point of my growth and development. So if you want to be a leader, it's not send me to the next conference. And it's not jamming yourself into a room with other people doing myth and vision and values. And it's not leadership. Mm-hmm. Leadership is gross, hard, dirty. It should bring a tear to your eye. If you're losing sleep over your subordinates, if you are responsible, the second most important thing you'll ever do in your life is lead other people after raising children. Lead other people. And raising children is kind of leading people on a macro level, right? Right. But lead other people because you shaped their entire lives. If you're a bad boss, some of these people end up on first and they're in counseling and they got, 40% of all, if you have 100 people in your organization, 40 of them are probably at some level of need in mental health. And it's not because of your work environment, it might be. Right. So you have to manage all of those things. So it takes constant exposure and you got to be in it. Yeah. So it's like being on the farm. You can't milk the cows without putting on the boots and being in the crowd. You got to do it.
Yeah, people don't realize all that's involved, especially people who didn't have to go through the motion. They just feel, I got my degree, I did this, I did that, and I earned it. You really didn't, and you have no idea what steps people are going through to get there. So I agree 100%.
Yeah. Now, go ahead. No, please.
Go ahead. No, I was going to go on.
My buddy Stephen Long, he talked about. He says, everybody wants to see an organizational chart, that Napoleonic chart, where you fit, what square you fit in, who's above, who's below, how do I climb the big chart? He said, but that top block, that leader block, he said, most organizational charts are built with symmetric lines, right? From one block to the other is 2 inches, right? He said, but in reality, the distance between that top block and the next one down, whatever that is really big. Because normally the people on the top are there because they didn't like doing the stuff underneath.
Unfortunately, that is so true. Now tell us, your book, Giving Back, Life and Leadership from the Farm to Combat Zone and Beyond, explores your journey. So what's one lesson from your rural upbringing that proved invaluable during your military service?
Jeez, I would probably say, well, you just want one. I could go into a bunch, and I don't know which one's more important. I'll say, it's kind of a conglomeration of adaptability, MPS, and problem solving, working through things.
Right.
Because on the farm, if the wind blows really hard and knocks over a fence in half the barn, your choice isn't to say, I'm not going to milk the cows today or I'm done farming.
Mm-hmm.
The choice is you got to figure a way to get it all done, figure a way to rebuild the barn and the fence, right? And there's a financial piece in that. There's a time piece in that. There's a materials piece in that. There's a time of year piece in that, all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you got to call the neighbor. Sometimes you have to humble yourself and call the neighbor and say, I need some help over here. Can you come over and help? Right? And so you have to find that humbled piece. And so that whole thing, when you get in the military, as soon as we do a lot of planning in the military, understanding that as soon as the plan meets the enemy, it becomes irrelevant because you have to adapt.
Yeah.
So yeah, you cannot be rigid.
Yeah.
And boy, when you're leading people, especially in a combat environment, when you're leading people, you got to be semper gumby, as we call it, uber flexible. And if you're not, you'll fail miserably.
Yeah.
You'll get tied to rules and regulations and those type. And I'm not saying don't follow the rules and don't follow the regulations.
Right.
But you got to have 3 or 4 different paths to get to the same point. And that's to get to yes.
Yeah. Life is all about adaptability. I mean, we all have that textbook of, you go to school, you get married, you buy a home, you have your kids, blah, blah, blah. Well, they don't talk about layoffs. They don't talk about divorce. They don't talk about you didn't make enough money, so how are you going to pay the mortgage? How are you going to pay? You have to adapt for all of the curveballs life's going to throw at you. And business is a whole other realm. So if you're not, I don't know, say willing, able, or understanding how to adapt to everything that life throws at you, you're going to be in big trouble. So, yeah.
Let me give you a real world example that I think is out there right now that's not being discussed. You have a lot of institutions that are still structured to make guys like me happy. Good benefits, healthcare, those kind of things.
Right.
But lower wages. It sounds like a government job, right? City job, state job, right? You go to work for the state, you might have a really nice job. And if your kid gets cancer, you're not going to pay a penny. It's not going to financially ruin you because those plans are built that way to work. But the pay is low. Well, guess who doesn't care about that? The Z's, the millennial, they don't care about that. They don't even care about Social Security because they just have figured that they're not going to get any of that they need to do it on their own. Just give me my money and I will figure it out. Yeah. Well, think about how that's corporate management. That's the high level strategy, right? There's a financial piece to that. That's a corporate strategy. But think about how that leads to your retention, your recruiting, all those type of things. So what do? Do you get the yes? Or do you live in this false reality like, the Who Moved My Cheese book, right? The cheese is gone and I just think it'll come back. No, there's no hemming and hawing with people. People send you a demand signal. You have to react to that. They're not going to all of a sudden, you cannot stand on the highest of pedestals with the largest name tag in the world that says President of the World and Captain of the Universe, right? Right. And say, you should think like this. You know what people do? They go, no. And then they get on Indeed and they're looking for a job. And they're gone. Yeah. This is a veteran experience too. Yeah. Because we're looking for certain things when we get out. And if the environment's not there, 50% of veterans leave their job in the first year. Yeah, they don't make it easy. There's no transition it's unfortunate. No. Well, I guess speaking of transitioning from military to civilian life, it's challenging. So I guess what advice would you give to veterans navigating the process? Well, first things first. One is if you've got time off, there's a thing called terminal leave. If you've got time off, take every bit of it. Don't jump into a new job straight away. And the second thing is, I think everybody that serves in the United States military should see some sort of licensed mental health provider at least twice,
Right.
even if you think you don't need it.
Yeah.
Because once your mouth starts moving, and they ask you a couple of key questions, you're going to find out that you have a lot of needs. It's not like you got to lay down on a couch and be
Yeah.
admitted and be put on meds, but you need to understand where your anxieties are, that some of those are real, and then where some of your challenges are going to be, especially with boundaries and things like that.
Yeah.
And if you don't, it's a setup.
Yeah.
It's a setup.
Yeah, a lot of people don't want to believe that they have problems. And like even myself, like I've been through a lot of crap. You don't realize how it affects you, but I could tell you certain words, certain sounds, it's a trigger. And even trying to go to sleep. It could be something in a movie I saw last night that really had nothing relating to my situation, but there was something in it where now I'm waking up, so it does affect your life. And there's no shame in saying, okay, let me just talk to somebody, I mean.
Yeah. Well, there's, anything that we have to do difficult in life, you're trying to build a business or any of those anything, trying to build a business, raise children. The most unqualified you'll ever be, the worst resume you'll ever submit is to be a parent. It's the most unqualified you'll ever be for any job. And that's why the nuclear family works. That's why there's grandparents and uncles and aunts and people that have done it, right? To kind of fill the void. And when you don't have that, then you're kind of making it up as you go along. So the example is have a kid when you're young and then do it all by yourself without any resources, or have a kid when you're young and have all these resources. Which would you pick?
Yeah, the resources.
Right. You right, exactly. Especially, because you love your child and you want that out. Well, treat everything that way.
Yeah.
Don't be over here trying to wing it and be a tough guy or a gal. Stop it. Stop it.
The results aren't worth it. No.
Right. And then once you get healthy, once you understand these things, then 99% of the things that you would navigate in life, you can navigate on your own and kind of work through.
Yeah.
But understanding when the next hard thing comes, you may need some help.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, PTSD and moral injury is critical topics. So how do you approach these issues, and what resources or strategies do you recommend for people struggling?
So I'm glad you said moral injury with ease, that you understand that. But, I would say 90% of the population has no clue what moral injury is. So I try to make it easy. PTSD are things that you can't unsee, unhear, and unsmell. Period. Loud bangs, bad visuals. My PTSD is predicated on smells and sights, and because of not just years of doing trauma medicine to include combat time and things that go along with it. Moral injury is when you're in a situation where maybe you're a boss, which might be the United States government, through doctrine and policy and orders, lawful orders, as you do things that fly in the face of your morality and your beliefs. So, for instance, and I always hedge when I use this example, but it's probably the most extreme. If you're a young woman and your uncle sexually assaults you, that blows up everything that you know in the world, right? It blows up everything. It blows up trust. It blows up family. It blows all of it. You've been morally absolutely damaged for the rest of your life. And you have to work really, really hard to navigate those things. And it makes you deal with people completely differently. So when you're morally injured, that's a different set of baggage. Now, I think the two look like a DNA strand because they can cross over. Sometimes there's something, a sound or a smell or something that brings back not only the trauma, but the moral injury on top of it. I think that they can be intertwined, but they have to be handled differently, and you got to understand them both. And I own them both. I've got a story that is in one of the two books that's all Clear the Beds, and it's a combat story about probably the ultimate moral injury. So when these things happen, you got two choices. You can be a victim, or you can own it. Mm-hmm. And once you start owning it, you can actually be productive with it. Believe it or not, it can actually be a gift once you start to own it. So, there's cute little charts. If you Google owner victim, there's cute little charts that do comparisons between the actions of people that are victims and people that are owners, and the difference between the two are very, very, very. They're close, but it's just how you perceive them. And I'll tell you, when I'm in my biggest ditches, when I'm, the most frustrated and I'm off, my whole equilibrium is off. Boy, I start getting into the things that go through my mind with these victim statements. And I'm like, stop that, it's this part of you got to own this thing and move forward. So, yeah.
Yeah, some people, they don't want to put in the effort to, own it and say, okay, let me work through it. It's easier to just be the victim, but you're suffering, nobody else but you. Yeah.
Or to be in denial, drown it with alcohol or something else, and that stuff's dangerous too. So,
Now tell us, you work in emergency management, spans diverse crises. So how do you remain calm and effective in the face of chaos? And what lessons can others learn from your experience?
Well, I'll tell you, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I didn't. If you want to get into leadership, crisis management and those type of leadership things, you have to do reps. You got to do reps. Mm-hmm. You have to do mental reps. As an ER nurse, when you're driving down the road and you got nothing else to do, you do a cardiac arrest and a trauma patient. You do it all in your mind. What am I going to do? What am I going to get? How am I going to do those things? And I guarantee you, almost every time that I did that extensively, the next day I'd go to work and it would be right there in front of me.
Wow.
And he did the mental. So you have to do the mental reps. You have to. Yeah. And because it's muscle memory. Crisis management is about your team, and teams, high-performing teams, are led by leaders, and teams take their cues off of their leaders. And so, how do you remain calm in really high-stress situations? You don't have a choice. It can be damaging. You got to take care of yourself when you do this, because sometimes you don't get to have the emotions everybody else does. And when you suppress those emotions, that's in the book. I wrote all about it. I think the title of that chapter is People Even Cry on the Farm. And, I went through my last combat tour and never shed a tear. It was the most damaging thing I ever did. So
I guess you get that mental block on. I have to focus, and you're not paying attention to what's inside.
Well, when you're the chief and you're in the middle of the room and you got casualties laying everywhere and you got 20-year-old kids working on them to work for you, what's your choice? Cry? Yeah. Not right then. So when do you cry? And the answer ended up being never. And it's just, then you kind of, when do you get your space? So you got to do this a balance. It's balance.
Yeah.
And keeping your life balanced is not easy. And sometimes we think that we're just doing really well because we only look at the one report card. But I'm telling you, if your boss loves you and you're moving up through your organization and you just got a big fat pay raise and you're 35 pounds overweight and you have to take blood pressure medicine every day, and if you do believe in the Lord, but you're not spending enough time working on those type of things, you got to balance.
Yeah.
That's not successful. But sometimes we'll look at the one report card and go, I'm doing fine. I'll work on the other things later. I just had coffee with a near and dear friend, and this was the whole gist of the conversation.
Yeah, it's always say pick and choose your battles, because I do know people like that. Like, it's funny, I lived in Pennsylvania at one point, and I lived there for 8 months and stopped because it was literally a 3-hour, without rain, a 3-hour travel each way to and from work. But there were so many people that the wives were home and the husband worked in the city. And I always used to joke and say, well, that's a husband who doesn't want to be home with his family. The wife was content because she, had a house and they had good money. But it's like, where that's happiness for both of you. I mean, that's not what life's about. But yeah, I hear you.
Oh, and back to your initial question, you're actually ineffective because the rats actually see you. I think the higher people get, the only reason I can say these things, Patricia, is guilty.
Yeah.
Okay? Guilty. We've all done it, right? There's a great book written by my friend Ken Benoit called "We've All Done It," and it's about toxic work environments. And it says nobody was the perfect leader.
Yeah.
So so totally guilty. But you can get to a level where you think that you don't have any windows in your house anymore. And actually, if your whole house is glass, and everybody sees everything. And when you frown, I had a boss one time, we came back from a formal event. And whatever my body language was, it wasn't positive. And he told me, he said, they're all looking at you. And when you do that, it sets the tone for the whole thing. And I thought to myself, he's right. And so you only get so much grace. You can build up a lot of equity with your team and trust and followership and all those type of things. And you can blow it all up with one outburst.
Yeah. Good reminder for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, it's not that we can't have emotions or do those kind of things, but quite frankly, if you want the title, you want the money, and you're going to be responsible for other people's lives, then you got to do the work. And that work sometimes
100%.
requires you got to do the reps, and you got to be, you got to do it right.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's all. It's giving back. It's clearly an essential theme for you. So how do you encourage others to adopt a mindset of service and contribution?
Boy, there's a book out there called Bowling Alone. I don't know if you've read it.
No.
It's all about this phenomenon of how our American culture has changed from Wednesday bowling leagues to people bowling alone. The parable in there is the fact that volunteerism in our country used to be something natural. It was kind of expected. And even as a young person in your communities, there was opportunities to be in clubs and volunteer with the Boy Scout, whatever you were doing.
Right.
And a lot of that stuff is gone now. And so we figured, well, I'll just show up on a bad day. I'll just be there on a bad day. And so giving back requires you to do a couple of things. One is you have to look backwards and understand all of the nuggets, these hard things, all of these nuggets that have been given to you, because they're all unique. They're like snowflakes. And then you need to decide what you want to do with them. Some people die with them. They never share them. But at some point in time in your life, you have to start unpacking those. Knowledge is power only when shared. It's in a book. Knowledge is power only when shared. Some people say knowledge is power. Well, it is. It's power. You can leverage it in a negative fashion to make it powerful, which is at the detriment of others. Or share what you know. It makes you stronger, not weaker.
Right.
Our natural human tendency is not to share knowledge. And so giving back is what builds generations over time, is what families grow, is what builds off your moral foundations and the positive things and cultures that are necessary. And so some of that requires ritual and bringing back certain rituals and those type of things. So we don't need somebody to crash a couple airplanes into the towers in New York to drive us back to what giving back and volunteerism should be.
Right.
It should be a natural thing, so that if somebody does that, our response and the way we recover from that is so much easier, and we're so much more in tune with people, and we know people.
Yeah.
You should never be meeting somebody because of a disaster in your community. You should know people already, and when everybody shows up to help, it should be, hey, Patricia, hey, Dave, let's go do our thing. It shouldn't be, where are you from, what side of town? It shouldn't be that.
I agree 100%, and it is true. It's heartwarming to see when there's a crisis, people come together, but you're right. It shouldn't have to take a crisis for that to happen. And it just seems the world we live in nowadays, it's like nobody wants to do anything unless they're getting paid for it. And everybody wants to do less and get paid more. And it's like the world is, it seems like it's going downhill. It's like we have to do a stop, let's reevaluate and get back on track, because it's, I agree 100%. There's so much that needs to be changed, but what do I know?
Well, the thing is that I do see a shift in some areas. I think it's not a necessity. But the big yank on the chain. I mean, these things like that just happened in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've ever been to Bourbon Street.
No.
But if you've been to Bourbon Street, you'd have a full appreciation for what happened down there, because it's a unique. The way it's built and everything is unique. So a truck going that fast down Bourbon Street to me is unfathomable.
No.
I mean, it's not good. But when you look at these kind of things, we even geographically isolate ourselves. And I say, well, I'm in Montana, I'm not in Louisiana, so what does it affect me? We should take that personal. We should take it personal, right? It should be personal. Not only, but what can I do, but what do I need to be doing so that it doesn't come to my community? And if it does, then we're doing the right things.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy, because I do, do a lot of these podcasts, and I've done some for so many, like one gentleman was teaching kids, teaching parents to help their kids so that you don't ever have to do, school shootouts, and teaching them how to hide under your, and I try to spread the word with things like this. I always say, if someone has a story that I think will help others, by all means, I'm happy to have you on. But again, it's like, I commend these people who want to do the right thing and help. But again, you have to see how many podcasts I have lined up, because everybody's now charging for them. It's like, just, you have to take a step back and say, it's not about you. That's always my biggest thing. It's not about you. It's about who you're servicing, who's out there in the world, and, get the message in front of people to help people. It's just a big mess.
One of the, when you do a 30-year military career and you move 15 times, when you go away, people give you things, right? Plaques and memorabilia and those kind of things. One of the things I'm most proud of, I don't keep a lot of stuff on my walls from my military time, but I do have it by the front door. One of the things I'm most proud of is my first sergeants. The first sergeants are people, right? They take care of people. You're in trouble, you go see the first sergeant. You got to march, you go see the first sergeant. You got to get home because your mom died, you go see the first sergeant. They do everything. And in my senior leader positions, the first sergeants, I was their functional manager. So they all kind of came to me for advice. They're going away. Present is a big giant poster of a cavalry officer, first sergeant, with the stripes and the whole thing. And it's pretty cool. And on the plaque, it's got my name and the time that we served together. And then it's got a quote on there. And the quote is, "It's not about you."
That's awesome. Yeah, people need a reality check on that, I think.
Well, I mean, our country, the longevity of our country and its standing in the world, for it to continue beyond probably the next 20 years, is going to have to be that motto.
Yeah.
It can't be. You cannot, when you're approaching things, you cannot look internally. You have got to look out and say, what can I do? Not what's in it for me. And this is not a generational thing, Patricia. My mother, God bless her, she died just over a year ago. She's 89 years old. She was born in 1934. So when World War II ended, she was about 11, 12 years old. She says her generation started adversely affecting this country because post-World War II, by the time she was 20, there was nothing she couldn't get her hands on. We had everything. Everything was made here. Everything was cheap. The gas was cheap. People drove big hot rod cars. Happy days. Let's show happy days. That's what it's all about. Right? And she said from that point on, we kind of lost it. And the only people that really kept us in check were the people that went through the Depression. And almost all of them are dead. Yeah. So and I don't want another depression to wake us up.
I know. I agree 100%. Now, I guess, tell us about MAX FAB Consulting. Like, what inspired you to start it, and how does it help leaders and organizations?
Sure. Well, my veteran transition and the difficulties I had inspired me to start it. MAX FAB was when I went to Iraq in 2008, which was my last combat tour, leading about 360 medics doing. We were the main trauma center for the whole country of Iraq during that time. I figured I had to do two things as a leader. One was shared pain, because everybody's going to have pain. So shared pain. And we translated pain into push-ups, which was an amazing thing because I hate doing push-ups. So I figured if I hate them, then we'll just all hate them together, and then we'll have a shared moment every day. So by the time I'd get around and see everybody during shift change in the mornings and that kind of stuff, I'd probably done 160 or 180 push-ups. It's crazy. I don't do those anymore. I don't like push-ups. And then you had to have an attitude. You had to have an organizational attitude. So when people would ask me, Chief, how are you doing today? I'd say I'm maximum fabulous, which would people, they'd smile just like you're smiling. And they'd say, what in the heck is that? I'd say, well, that's the highest of the hierarchy on the attitudinal scale. And if you're not there, you got to work to get there and you got to get the person next to you to max fab. Because if we're not max fab, then we're harming ourselves. And it was my one little war cry. And so if you see that flag behind me at the bottom, that's the flag that came off of the trauma center when I left.
Wow.
And embroidered on the bottom, that's all the dates and times that I was there. But on the bottom of that, embroidered there, it's maximum fabulous.
Yeah.
So there's another going away thing. But that's a piece of war history there. That flew over our sons and daughters and all of our wounded for months and months. So Yeah, so there's, between It's Not About You and Maximum Fabulous, I guess those are the like 4 leadership things. So MAX FAB Consulting. And we do a lot of things. I do leadership speaking. I'll come and talk to your organizations, tell you the MAX FAB story. It's a great keynote. I take you through the whole deal, or right down to working with companies on this veteran transition thing and trying to get the environment right for veterans. And that's the passion.
I mean, I always have this big pet peeve about, like I see, what is it, Tunnel for Tower, so many organizations out there that it's people helping people. And it's like, I always hate to say, like, well, there should be more. You see homeless vets and, people, committing suicide. It's like, what are we doing for them? The Tunnel for Towers is awesome, but there should be so much more. And I'm glad that you're doing this because it's, again, people don't want to speak up that they need this help, but they do, It's inevitable.
Well, and it's, our conversations are really a 360 back to MAX FAB because everybody wants to say thank you for your service, but it's usually with a stiff arm because they don't want the rest of the conversation that goes with it because it makes them uncomfortable, understandably. But if you want to go beyond thank you for your service, get a hold of me. Let's talk about how your organization can do a few things to make yourself vet ready. And when you're vet ready, you understand these nuances and how to bring veterans on board. You certainly know how to do it for handicapped people because we have a law that tells you exactly what you have to do. We don't have that for veterans. And so the end result of poor transition can be homelessness, can be suicide, and all these emergencies, the alcohol use and those kind of things. So, yeah.
There'd be more of you. But tell us, what's next for you? Are there any new projects, goals, or missions you're excited to share?
I guess the big thing that's the most exciting is I was stationed in Guam for a couple of years, and the island of Guam is going to have us out to do a 5-day seminar in June. Nice. And this will be with the leadership of the island and all of that, based along the veteran lines with some training and stuff that goes even beyond just the vet ready MAX FAB stuff. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's something to, and we'll have a build up that goes to that. Right. And like I said, I'm working with our city here, which is exciting to me, but it's requiring a level of patience and those type of things too, because just because Dave says it doesn't mean everybody's on board, and they want to probe and pick, and sometimes people come to the conclusion, well, I think we're okay where we're at. Well, you're probably not. Yeah. But I will tell you, Patricia, this is about quality and not quantity. I don't need volume. I need 5 or 6. I need 5 or 6 really, really dedicated people in my life every year for me to work with. And yeah, there's a cost to it, but I'd make it uber affordable. And if it works, what I can recover in retention, recruiting, and turnover in your organization just through the veteran work, pay for anything I would charge you, 100 times over. So.
No, amazing. Yeah. Anything else you want to add that we didn't already cover?
No, just get a hold of me. MAX FAB Consulting, MAXFAB Consulting.com or getvetready.org, which is the nonprofit. And on there, the books are on there, the websites are on there, the blogs are on there. I do my own podcast, which is the Kangaroo Leadership Podcast, because kangaroos can only physically move forward. So those are the kind of leaders we want. Nice. So it's all there. But just reach out, click on my calendar on there, schedule some time, and we can talk for free. And hopefully I can plant some seeds and we can move forward and make veterans' lives better and just make our whole country better.
Nice. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Again, that was David Nordel. So thanks for listening to Real Conversations with Patricia. Never miss an episode by subscribing to the channel. So thank you again.
Thank you for listening to Real Conversations with Patricia, talking with some of the most brilliant minds on their journey to success and their recommended strategies. Please leave your feedback and visit pristineadvisors.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Feel free to let me know your thoughts, suggestions, and anything else you'd like me to cover. Together, we can make success happen for all.